tonight we want to welcome Stephen Shore. At the young age of 23, Stephen became the first living photographer in 40 years to have a solo show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He's published more than 25 photography books, and he is here to discuss his newest book of his oldest photographs, early work. Please welcome Stephen Shore.
Thank you for coming. I'll introduce you to Laura Steele, who's my
microphone.
Laura Steele is my studio manager who plays a role in this story. Is this on?
Might just need to be switched back on because we were sitting here for a while.
Oh, yeah.
I can't read upside down, Mike. One of those says on. Hello, beautiful people.
On?
Testing.
I just turned it off and on.
Well,
Is it supposed to be up?
No.
say something.
Green light's
Is this on? Can you hear me without it?
There we go. We figured it out. How many cold salads does it take?
Okay. So, thank you for coming. I want to introduce you to Laura Steele, who's my studio manager, who plays a role in this story. And so let me tell you how this began. My wife Ginger and I last fall were shopping on Market Street and came home and found a stack of prints that Laura made. She'd been telling me for years that I should look at my early work, and I think finally she took matters into her own hands and made a stack of prints. And the print on top of the stack is this picture, which is taken a block away from here. Those are my parents. This was taken in 1963 or 64. I've been living in the area since 1982. I have no recollection of ever having been here before. And so I drove through this intersection 15 minutes before I saw the print, and there was this picture. You want to give your side of the story?
Sure. I mean, I think I probably first interacted with this work when I first started working for you many, many years ago, because all of your photographs, all of your negatives and contact sheets were still in the binders, if you recall. They were like elementary school binders. And definitely not archival. So that was, I think, one of the first jobs I took on when I started working with you, was to get everything archived into archival boxes. And so that was my first interaction, and it was just with the contact sheets. And I think while I, recognized there was interesting work there, I was just kind of in the mode of archiving them. But over the years, there were various points where I think you had maybe 5 or 6 that, you had a bunch that you printed.
That I printed at the time. I still had the prints.
But I remember, I think it was it the Fiden's Conceptual Artist series?
Contemporary Artist.
Contemporary Artist series, thank you. And I think you had a couple of prints from that series, from the early work series in that book. And so it was, I think, around that time that I had to go back and scan the negative. So I started looking more closely and started recognizing that there was some incredibly powerful work in there. And the other thing I recall is that I said, we should start scanning these negatives. And you, rightly so, in terms of an archival mind, said, nope, we need to scan the color work before it degrades. But I was sneaky, and I started scanning the work anyway. I put them off to the side of the scanner as I was scanning 8x10 work or other 35mm color work.
Well, let me interrupt you here,
Yeah.
because it reminded me of something. There's a photographer who's an old friend of mine named Nick Nixon, and he only works with 8x10, and he will develop a negative, look at it, and say it's no good and put it in the trash. And his wife would go through the trash and pick out the one she liked. And when he had his first show at the Modern, a third of the prints were pictures she'd saved from the trash.
Well, I guess, I mean, that's an interesting story and reflection of really what I was scanning, because you told me not to scan them, and I was doing it anyway. I had to make decisions about things that I thought were interesting, and I was doing it just based on the contact sheets. So there were ones that I thought were interesting when I saw them on the contact sheet, and then I would scan it and something might be out of focus or it didn't hold up. But, you know, it was just, honestly, I was just trying to grab as much as I could of the images that caught my eye. And so I did that. I mean, I think I looked back to when I first started scanning them, and I think it was about 10 years from when we published, or you published the book. So yeah, it was a period of 10 years of slowly going through and pulling more negatives into we have a drum scanner at Bard, so getting those on the drum scanner with the 8x10s or the 35 millimeters or whatever, 4x5s, whatever it was that I was scanning at the time. So.
Well, I'm grateful. So when I look at the pictures, let me show you one. I'm going to show you the earliest one. This is not going to be a slideshow. We're not doing. I have 3 pictures to show you. This is the earliest picture. I was going to a school in Tarrytown called Hackley. This was in 1960, so I was probably 12, maybe turning 13 when this was made. And I'm showing this because, well, I don't remember taking most of these pictures. This was a long time ago. So I look at them as an observer, and what I would, and as a person who's been a teacher for 40 years, and what I observe looking at the work is that a couple of things come to mind. That I understood from the very beginning that a camera doesn't point, it frames. That there's a formal sense to all the work, that it always begins with a frame, that everything is organized within the frame. The other thing I see that I understood intuitively, I mean, this was not taught, I don't know how this came to me, but I understood that the world of a photograph is distinct from the world we experience. It's a truncation of that world. We live in a world that we see is three-dimensional and flows in time and doesn't have edges around it. And the world of a photograph is flat, it's static, it has edges. In this case, it's black and white. It has a single plane of focus. You can see the focus is on his back, and the rest is slightly out of focus. And so it's very different from the world we see. And that has to be understood. You have to see the way a camera sees and have it be coherent in its own terms. I guess it was the late 70s or maybe early 80s, the film critic for The New Republic, Stanley Kaufman, wrote a review of a photography show. It's the only time that I'm aware that he ever talked about photography. It was a show of Alfred Stieglitz's work at Lake George, a show at the Museum of Modern Art. He described the show, he did a critique of the show, and then he went on to say that that afternoon he went to a screening of a Bergman film, I think it might have been Wild Strawberries, and said it's a film he hadn't seen in a few years, and was struck by that every shot in the film was as beautiful as a Stieglitz photograph. And then went on to say, and this is the part that caught my attention, and it had the advantage of being in a more complete medium. And when he wrote that, I saw that he did not understand photography. There is no question film is more complete. It's narrative. It has the logic of narrative. It has the logic of editing, the unique logic that editing can bring. It can show motion. It can show wind blowing through a meadow. It has sound. That means it can have dialogue and the unique meaning that words can convey. It can have music. It can record the sound of wind blowing through a meadow. There's no question that film is more complete. What attracts certain people to photography is, in fact, its incompleteness. And that's what I mean about this separate world, a world distinct from the world we see, that relates to it, is drawn from it, but is distinct. And that it has to have its own logic. It has to be, this photographic world has to be complete in itself. And I see this in the earliest pictures. I don't know how it got there. We heard a wonderful schedule of events here and in the area, and all these authors do readings. And so I thought I would do a reading. I wrote a short autobiographical introduction to the book, and I'm just going to read the beginning of it. And let me preface it by saying, so the work was done between 1960 and 1965. Almost all of it in New York. This and maybe two other pictures in Tarrytown, where the school was. This picture in Rhinebeck. All the other work was in New York City, and I would roam the city. Life was different then in the city. People hung out on the street. They were not scrolling through TikTok. They weren't even watching television that much. There were, at the time, I think 6 stations in New York, which was a lot for more than most places. But in 65, when Marshall McLuhan, it was 65 or 64, I don't remember, when Marshall McLuhan wrote Understanding Media, he divided media into hot and cool media. And a hot medium is one that comes at you, that you just sit back and experience, and a cool medium is one you have to pay attention to. And he classified television as a cool medium because the screen was small, it was black and white, and had scanning lines. He would classify a modern television today completely differently. So it wasn't addictive. And people were out on the street. Also, when I was 8, I was living on an area called Peter Cooper Village on East 20th Street, and I was going to Little Red Schoolhouse on Bleecker Street, and would walk up from 20th to 23rd, take the 23rd Street crosstown to 6th Avenue, transfer to the 6th Avenue bus downtown. 6th Avenue was 2 ways in those days, and repeat that path going home. And I was not alone. This is how 8-year-olds got around the city. You had a bus pass, and I would use my bus pass to go and take photographs. Not when I was 8, but later. And so kids felt completely free roaming the city. And when I was a teenager, it came absolutely naturally that I would take subways all over. I would take buses. I would sometimes photograph. There may be 4 pictures in the book that are taken out of bus windows. And the people look different. And you'll see, when you look at the book, you'll see, and that's what I'm writing about. The faces of the adults in my early photographs seem more deeply etched by life than the faces I see today on Manhattan streets. I think about their shared experience. A 40-year-old then would have grown up during the Great Depression, would have been 18 when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. My father-in-law, Lee Kramer, was just that age when he landed on Omaha Beach. Half of his newly made friends perished that day. If one were Jewish, as my family was, you would have been further traumatized by the Holocaust. I was born in 1947 into a world that had lived through 2 decades of struggle. Though they occurred before my birth, the events of those decades so impacted the older generation's lives that they formed a background to the experience of my generation. It was in the air. Say, like if someone burns toast, as Dick Halloran tells Danny in The Shining, referring to the lingering effects of past events. These challenges led some to develop a deep-seated resilience. This brings to mind the psychoanalyst Bruno Bettelheim's description of the message of fairy tales, that a struggle against severe difficulties in life is unavoidable, is an intrinsic part of human existence, but that if one does not shy away, but steadfastly meets unexpected and often unjust hardships, one masters all our obstacles and at the end emerges victorious. So the best part of that reading is Bruno Bettelheim, not me. So I look at this picture, and of course I was first struck by this coincidence. But there's something else that I find interesting about this picture. I think about, well, I don't remember what was on my mind when I took it. I don't remember even taking it. But I can look at a picture and see what's on the photographer's mind. This is what I do as a teacher. I look at student work and I can read their visual thinking. And what I see is someone who thought about exactly where to place the camera and thought about how 3-dimensional space is collapsed onto the picture plane. And so things in the distance, like this, bear an exact relationship to things in the foreground, like this. And as I look through the picture, I'm looking at where the building comes to this pole, where this comes to here, where this comes to here, where this is in relation to this. I'm looking at all these relationships and see that they're very exact. And it's clear to me that the photographer, as I'm reading it in the third person, is thinking about this, is observing this, and thinking that I'm going to stand in just a place that tries to make sense of a 3-dimensional world in 2 dimensions. I also am interested in this shadow, which comes across the ground and then goes up the side of the car, and how the angle of the shadow and the angle of their shadows works in the picture. And I'm going to show you, so this is probably 1964, I'm going to show you a picture I made in 1974, exactly 10 years later. So I'll tell you a little what happened after this. The book goes up to 1965, into just the very beginning of 65. In March of 65, I met Andy Warhol, who invited me to come to the factory to photograph. I wasn't going to school much. I was interested in film, and I was going to at least every other day going to double bills at the New Yorker Theater on Upper Broadway had Hollywood films. The Bleecker Street Cinema had Italian, French, Japanese, Russian, Scandinavian. And so I probably went to every other day to one of these. I had a job photographing at an orchestra called the Festival Orchestra that had one very well-funded season and had weekly concerts at both Philharmonic and Carnegie Halls. They had a Carnegie Hall and repeated the next night. So I was going to 2 concerts a week and 3 rehearsals and movies and going out and photographing. And I really wasn't going to school much. Laura and I were just talking before. Her daughter claimed to have pink eye today. You know, you can get pink eye really easily if you don't feel like going to school. And I don't know if I had pink eye, but I know I faked illnesses all the time to avoid going to school. And so finally, in my senior year, when I met Warhol, I just thought, I can't even make the pretense that I'm going to continue going to my school, and dropped out. And then spent on and off the next 3 years photographing at Warhol's factory, which was a very different circumstance. Like this work, it's largely photographing people, but unlike this work, I'm not roaming the streets. I'm in one room almost all the time with people who are my friends, who I see for 3 years, who love being photographed. They loved being photographed. And so they didn't even care that I was there. I mean, I became invisible, and it was a very different circumstance. I left the factory after about 3 years because I saw that for a lot of the people there, I knew this was going to be their golden age. This was going to be the highlight of their life. And I was too ambitious for that. So, and I think Andy understood that, because Andy was very ambitious. And I left and began doing black and white sequential work, conceptually based sequences, and that formed the basis of my show at the Met. I then started working in color, which at the time was verboten in art photography, but there were about 4 or 5 people who, at about that same time, completely independently, started really devoting their attention to how to understand color. And it was me and Bill Eggleston and Bill Christenberry in Alabama, and Joel Meyerowitz in New York, Helen Levitt in New York, and Luigi Ghiri in Italy. And all kind of independently started. I mean, color had been used for decades. There are color photographs from 1912, but most art photographers, none of the art photographers who tried it really tried to figure it out. They tried and said, I don't like it, and Edward Weston shot a box of color transparency films that I didn't like it, and that was it. And didn't think, okay, I'm having problems with it, what if I spend a year and figure it out? So I did about a year and a half of 35 millimeter color, and then switched to a view camera. First a 4.5 and then an 8x10. An 8x10 in 1974, and did a cross-country trip. And so here's this picture, and then, okay, thank you, Laura. And then 10 years later, in Regina, Saskatchewan, with no memory of this picture at all, I mean, zero, I did this picture, which also even more strongly has the relationships of foreground to background. I'm looking at the jet trail in relation to the power lines, where this comes in relation to this, her back to that, and then the shadows coming in from the diagonal. and the couple standing on the street corner. And so that's what I thought of when I saw this picture. I was trying to think about when I got over this wonderful coincidence of having been in this intersection. I thought, I see something here.
I've seen this before.
Yes, I've seen it. Anyway, that's what I have to say, and I would be more than delighted to answer anyone's questions. You have a question?
I have a question.
Oh, here's one.
Yeah.
You mentioned you don't remember taking a lot of these photographs,
Yes.
but looking back now, people always look at their earlier works and think, I should have done this, I could have done this. So what's your relationship with these photographs?
I'm uncomfortable saying that they're amazing.
I'll say it.
But I wouldn't have thought I would have done anything differently. I mean, it's not the work I would do today. It's not the work that I did 5 years later. But I wouldn't have done anything differently.
That must be a great feeling.
Yeah. I mean, a number of publications have wanted to interview me, and I've said about it, and I've said, I'll talk to the writer, and I could be quoted, but I won't do an interview, because I didn't want to be in this position, because I can't say what was on my mind. I'm only coming to it as much an observer as you would be. And so what I said about these pictures was not based on my memory of what was on my mind when I took it. It's as someone who's taught for 40 years, looking at work and intuiting what's on the photographer's mind. I was looking at the box of contact sheets, and on a contact sheet, the picture is 1 inch by 1.5 inches, about like that. And I saw a full-frame figure. So this is a person who's smaller than the vertical size of the frame. And I knew from its posture that this is Bobby Kennedy, because he had this kind of hands in his pocket, the jacket pulled. It was Bobby Kennedy. And so I get a magnifying loupe and look at it. It's Bobby Kennedy standing on the roof of a car with a crowd of people all around him. And I look at the rest of the contact sheet. I look at the rolls I shot before. My contacts are in chronological order. The rolls after. And what it is I went to the Democratic Convention in 1964 in Atlantic City. The rolls before are on a train. There are other young people with political signs and buttons. There's this rally outside the convention, the street thronged with people, like shoulder to shoulder with Bobby Kennedy standing on the roof of a car. And then there were a couple of rolls inside the convention hall. I had a floor pass. I remember none of it. And it's not like I look at it and think, that brings, now I know. And I wasn't doing drugs yet. I have no explanation for why I don't remember this.
I have a question,
Yes.
Stephen. So when you first looked at this work, it was because I had first put a pile of prints in front of you. Then we looked, I think, at a much broader group of files on
Yeah.
the computer. And then there was a point which you went back to the contact sheets, and I think you selected a handful of other ones to
Yeah.
scan. One of the things that we've talked about is how important it is to see students' contact sheets,
Yes.
to understand what they're thinking when they're photographing, and
Yes.
kind of what they're choosing versus not choosing. So I guess I'm curious what it was like to look at the contact sheets and what you saw in the contact sheets versus singular prints.
So Laura's referred to a number of conversations we've had over the years about student work. I look at their contact sheets because every now and then I see pictures that are far in advance of what they think they're doing. When some artists, when they're in the midst of work, something every now and then takes over, and they do work that goes beyond what they think their interests are and what they're capable of. And the reason I look at the contact sheets is that when they edit that work, their more conventional mind takes over, and they pick the pictures that match their conditioned ideas of what photography is. But they have made these other pictures. These are not accidents. This is, they are in touch with something, they're in the midst of work, they're in touch with something in their unconscious that is producing these pictures. And then they reject them because it doesn't match their conditioned idea of a photograph. And that was the same experience. There were a lot of pictures I saw that were, I would say, were typical 14-year-old pictures. Maybe more advanced, but not. But there were all these other ones that where something else was happening. You know, I only teach one class now at Bard, and it's a view camera class. And all the students, it's required, all of our majors have to spend a semester with a view camera. We have one of our graduates here who was not happy with the 4x5 view camera and insisted on spending decades with an 8x10, which was the camera most dear to my heart. It is the most cumbersome camera. It is the least spontaneous camera. If I want to move the frame over to the left, I have to pick it up, go like this, and do it. You're not doing, you can't hold your phone and decide what a picture is. You have to have the picture in your head. With an 8x10, it's different from a 4x5, and you'll relate to this, Michael. When you have your hand on the lens board to adjust the lens board, you're so close to the ground glass you can't see the whole picture. It's the only camera that you're making important structural decisions and decisions about content, exactly where the frame is going to go, without being able to see the whole picture. And so this forces you to conceptualize the picture. You conceptualize it when you take it. You don't walk around with a camera. I get a picture in my head. I know this is where I'm going to stand. I have the picture completely organized in my mind. And it's heavy. And the students shoot 12 sheets of film a week. When they're shooting 35 millimeter, they shoot 70 pictures a week. So it is the most deliberate way of taking a picture. And I asked my class about halfway through the semester last spring, when you're working, how many of you find yourself in a flow state? And every hand went up. There is something about this process that the most deliberate, heaviest, largest, slowest camera made somehow opens a door to a person working in a flow state. They get so into the process of the camera that they forget themselves in a way. And a door opens for something else to take over. So that's an extreme example, but I see it in 35 millimeter work, and that's what I saw here.
It makes me think of, now I'm going to forget the author's name, who wrote about flow state. Do you remember his name?
I do, but I can't pronounce it.
Okay.
Mikhail Shinkshak-Mokai.
Yes, thank you for doing.
I'm sure I have it wrong.
But, right, there were 3 things that were necessary for a flow state. You have to decide you want to do it, or want to do it, and decide you're going to do it, right? The second thing is you can't be distracted. You have to singularly focus on the task at hand. And the third thing was it has to be hard. It can't be too easy or you'll get bored, and it can't be too hard or you'll get frustrated, but it still has to be hard.
I don't know about the first one, because I don't know if these students of mine, or me at this time, were thinking, this is my intention. I think it's the other part, that it's hard and it's involving, and you stop thinking. It's so involving that you stop thinking about other things. I mean, I have a new career as a writer. It happened during COVID, and a Japanese magazine had wanted to do an issue on my work and wanted me to write about influences. And this happened just in March of 2020. So I had time to write. And I started writing, and it turned into not only that issue, but I wound up writing a memoir. And now I found myself continuing to write. And I love doing it. I do it almost every day. I find it fascinating. I find that there's something special about coincidences, that if I'm writing something and I were to walk into the store and randomly pick up a book, I feel like I'll find something that relates to what I'm writing. And I don't think this is just me. I've spoken to friends who are writers by profession. This happens to them all the time. On the other hand, I find I have words in my head all day long. I'm thinking in words, and that never happened to me before, because for years, for decades, I thought visually. When I'm working, when I'm photographing, there are no words in my head. I'm looking and I'm doing this, moving the camera over. I'm not thinking. I'm looking. I analyze the relationships for you, but I'm not putting those into words. I'm looking and I'm just. I'm visually getting into this process. The process is totally involving. It has to be an effort for it to be totally involving, and then something takes over.
I think for the students, just being in the structure of the class is the kind of framework of, I'm there because I've decided to be here and I've decided to do the work. And then I think the other part is that when I suppose you could be looking at your phone while you're shooting with a 4x5, but I think it's something that takes all your attention, and so that you're less likely to be distracted in terms of the second element. And when you're printing, you can't bring your phone into the darkroom, so it keeps you focused.
And at Bard, in our program, you can't bring your phone into the classroom.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, I had a quick question.
Yes.
In your mind, would it be ideal for our students and all photographers to come to our photographs with this kind of amnesia about the story, the moment, because I know as a teacher, the temptation, this is something I kind of try to train them out of when they want to tell the story of when they were photographing or what was happening, and I'm interested in them seeing they've made.
Yes.
But it seems like you've had this unique experience.
Well, I'm telling stories because this is an artist talk.
Oh, no,
And so I thought I'd entertain you by telling stories.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I was just saying that you don't.
I'm not interested in student stories about a picture.
No, I'm talking about the way that you came upon this work, thanks to Laura, with these totally fresh eyes,
Yeah.
seeing them as if someone else made them. So this is something that it seems like would be wonderful if we could all do this with our own work, not have a kind of amnesia about.
Yep.
That's what I was saying. I wasn't saying you're telling me stories. I don't know.
So Tanya, what can I tell
No,
you?
I was just asking you if you thought that would be ideal, if they could, if almost like we could have a kind of amnesia about what, the moment and the narrative.
I did a signing and a talk last night at the Strand in New York with Michael Mack, who's my publisher. And we talked about, I like having a publisher and an editor who have definite ideas about how a book should look. And I learned this years ago because for years, for like 15 years, my publisher was Phaidon, and they had a great editorial director there. And now I love working with Michael Mack and his editor Liv. And I rely on them. And he said very few of especially the younger photographers, want input from them. They have their idea. This is how I want my book. And I look at it as he spent his life conceiving of books. For 16 years, he was Steigel's editorial director. So he is bringing something to it that I don't have. I haven't spent my life thinking about how to sequence pictures in books. I have ideas about it. I can put pictures in a sequence, but I haven't thought about it the way he has. And apparently a lot of younger artists, that this is rare. It's only the older artists who, he said, who have that collaborative relationship with him. And the reason, this is why I'm bringing this up, he said people get attached to photographs. It reminds them of something. They think about the day that they took it, and I can't get them to give it up.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah.
And I know it's not right for the book. It's not that strong a picture, but I know that they have this attachment. I can see it, but they won't let go. Yeah.
So yesterday you mentioned a lot about coincidences.
Yes.
And in modern instances, you also mentioned where you say that there was a photograph that was almost as if I had been the person that was supposed to take it and only I could take it.
Oh, that's I'm quoting Walker Evans.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those 2 points, plus the fact that you also mentioned that when you started to write, you would walk into a bookstore and you also learned the same thing. Have you ever considered, and if you haven't, that's fine, but that, or a better way to ask it is, do you think that whatever you're tuning into is something that always is, and you are either deciding to tune into it, and then that's working through you, and that's creating this work, or is it something that you're creating as a result of decisions that is coming from within you? Because it makes me wonder how, for example, in the grunge rock movement, there had to be a couple of bands to create a scene, and they were not always in the same area, but they created that scene. And you and William Eggleston, Bill Eggleston, and other people created that movement with the color photography. So have you ever considered where the source of this, whatever you want to call it, is from? And
Of the two possibilities, I think it's the first, that there's something that's present that people can tune into. Do you know how the word synchronicity came to be used by Jung?
no.
He was analyzing a woman, a difficult case that had gone on for years, and getting nowhere. And she was in his consultation room and recounting a dream she had the night before that it was centered on a scarab beetle. And just as she said it, he heard a tapping on his window in Zurich, and there was a scarab. which don't live in Switzerland. And in recounting that dream, she had a breakthrough which allowed for the resolution, or the degree of resolution in her case. And he started thinking about this, and this is how he wound up writing, calling it synchronicity, and writing a book on synchronicity. And with, at one point, collaborated with Wolfgang Pauli, the physicist, in the book on synchronicity.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, please.
So, did you ever, because obviously, when you were younger, dare I say, you were also if you can imagine a radio dial, you were tuned to that frequency at a very early stage. Did you ever discuss this with your cohorts the other great, pioneers of it? Do you think that, dare I ask, would you say that you were potentially did you choose this, or was it chosen? Because it's such an early...
Someone last night raised the question of where does this come from? And I wasn't completely sure how to answer it, and I've thought about it since then. Most people present a binary of nature and nurture. And I cannot look at my life and say that obviously I'm shaped by my experiences, I'm shaped by genetics, but I can't help but think there's something else. And I think people recognize it and talk about different things like a collective unconscious, or astrology, or past lives. I think people are trying to put some framework on a recognition that there's something other than nature and nurture. Because there was no art in my family. This was not in my environment. There were no art books. There was not a single art book at home. And there was no art in the history of my family. And I could see someone being drawn to what I would call an archetypal practice. If you go to... Were you with the talk last night?
I think I was the person who asked you.
Okay, so
Different shirt club.
okay, so I'm going to give you some of the same answer, that if you go to the Natural History Museum in Vienna, you will see the Venus of Willendorf, which is a sculpture made 35,000 years ago. Tens of thousands of years ago, people painted. People made music. These are, if there is a collective unconscious, these are deeply rooted in the collective unconscious. When I was born, photography was 114 years old. I don't know what's going on. But I look at the work, and I look at students. I had a first-year student last fall, and she seems kind of a little depressed. She's not a hard worker. I have to beat her to go back and reprint. Unbelievably talented. She doesn't know what she's doing, and I see what she's doing. And I see this incredible talent. She doesn't know where it comes from. I think it just happened. It happens. I don't say it just happens like it's a roll of the dice. I think something happens, and I have another student who, and I'm mentioning the quote flaws to say that these are otherwise kind of average people. This other student has a hard time following any instruction. Like, she'll fuck up registration and not sign up on the day she's supposed to when everyone knows when it is. And then her work in the 4x5, my 4x5 class, she would go back to the same scene and re-photograph it 8 times, trying slightly different angles, trying to see what would happen if this curb comes right into the corner, or what happens if it's a little above the corner. She is doing this intense visual structural analysis. It's fascinating.
Do you think it's because, like you were saying, when you're moving the view camera, you're not thinking? So,
I'm thinking, but thinking visually.
I'm sorry, yes, not thinking
Yeah.
with words.
Yeah.
But do you think it's potentially because, like, you basically described 2 people who, if you were to describe what a professional, or dare I say serious photographer would be, they're maybe not in that category, but because they're not in that category, they're easier to get into the flow state and allow whatever it is to receive and come in or out of them, whatever it is that people who are so intent on being a photographer and being, reproducing, like you said, what they think a good photograph is.
I'm not sure, because they are both photography majors, so they're saying, I want to be a photographer, like the other people in the class. I don't think they have more or less intention than the other people in the class. I just think something must have happened in their lives that allows this to happen. But since you've asked this twice, you had 3 times, you have something on your mind. So I'd be interested in hearing what you think is going on.
So I'm going to embarrass myself, but I sent you a couple of wild emails decades ago, and you probably thought I was, probably were right. I was batshit crazy. But that being said, when Modern Instances came out, I have the first and the second edition. I moved to Japan, and that's a very big volume down.
Are you a friend of Lynn Tillman? No. Okay. She had a friend in Japan who wrote to me about modernism.
Oh, okay. So I've been reading Modern Instances every day. I've read it a couple times now. Every morning I start my morning like that. And it's not because I'm trying to gain insight about photography, but just because you've raised certain, dare I say, issues that have really made me see things like all over, like I'm a brand new child. So a lot of the things that you talked about, I'm coincidentally experiencing on a regular basis. And so it made me start to realize that, or wonder if, because I have somehow put so much practiced, repetitive attention in doing this, my work now is reading the book and understanding, what I feel it is about. Because I've done that, now I have become attuned to certain things that are in the book that were completely oblivious to me, but yet I was trying to ask you almost 15 years ago, and it made me start to connect the dots and say, okay, he's answering the questions that I had about 15 years ago, but my wick was not trimmed, so I was asking things in a much more flamboyant manner because I didn't know how to process it. And you are now, at this time, formulating them as a kind of I guess I'd say a study, but you've already done the work. You've studied it, and as you said, it's everything like if there's been a gift from anyone to humanity for a long time, I would say that book was probably one of them, because if you go a step further and look into it, you've actually mapped out how to live more consciously. It's not about the photography, it's about making more use of your time in the illusion that we call reality. And you point out, things are not really as they seem. And you give very structured lessons in how to approach that. But as you said, you're describing it as an experience. You're not giving a person a guidebook. You're saying, here's an experience, take what you will with it. And I asked you last night, do you think, why is that happening now? Because this seems to be a time in the world where a lot of people are looking for answers. people are saying that the world's a hologram, scientists are saying that. So everything you're doing seems to be, once again, in lockstep with the times. And yet,
But by
at
the way, when you
14
say that, are you thinking of Donald Hoffman?
No,
Do you know Donald Hoffman?
No, I'm a complete neophyte. I just know Stephen Shore.
Okay.
So whoever,
You'll like Donald Hoffman. He was a perceptual psychologist. He wrote a book in the 90s called Visual Intelligence, and we had him come to Bard to give a talk. And he's written a book where he's saying that quantum mechanics has exploded the idea of space-time, and that we experience the world in space-time because we've evolved this way because it makes sense of things and makes life easier. But that it is an interface, the way an icon on a desktop is, the way a desktop is an interface. So very much like what you were saying.
and for me personally, that has been unlocked with modern instances. So it's not, for me, it's not a book at all about photography. And I was wondering if there was any, were you aware that that was what you were creating?
As I mentioned last night, and I hadn't said this before, I put two things in the book to kind of indicate my intentions. And one is the story about, the writing about André Breton's book Nadja, where Breton uses the story about this wispy woman he meets in Paris, and it's illustrated with, throughout the text, there are photographs that were taken from, he had another photographer photograph but from his point of view, I mean literally his point of view, with drawings by Nadja, with things like playbills, and he said that he did this so that a book would not just be read but would create an experience. And that was, see, I believe in the value of saying things obliquely. That if I were to begin the book with an introduction saying, I'm going to include images and text and poems and things out of left field to create an experience, it wouldn't create an experience. But if I say it about something else, if I let André Breton say it about his book, then there's a greater chance you would relate to it in mine. And the other thing I wrote about in the newer edition is what I call objective writing, where there are certain traditions in writing that are about using writing not to narrate something, not to convince someone of something, not to explain something, but to create an experience, which may not be what the writing on the surface is about. And this happens in fairy tales, in fables, in myths. In every religion has teaching stories. That's what teaching stories are about. Poetry. And I give an example of, I give two examples both from the 8th century. One in the East and one in the West. And the Western one was from Ovid. This is Actaeon discovering Diana naked. And then the other one is a Chinese poem, Tang Dynasty poem. Now I'll tell you, it's called Night Mooring Near Maple Bridge. And what I'm saying this because the poet is describing what he's seeing, what he's hearing, what he's seeing, what he's hearing. And I think it gives an experience Well, I'm not going to tell you, because that would be doing exactly what I said not to do. Night mooring near Maple Bridge. As I watch the moon go down, a crow caws through the frost. Under the shadow of maple trees, a fisherman moves with his torch. And I hear, from beyond Suchu, from the temple on Cold Mountain, ringing for me, here in my boat, the midnight bell.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, sorry, just to close it, I think that your book it succeeded in doing what you intended to do.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. I feel less secure as a writer. It's a new profession, and I love, if you say, I like your pictures, I say, yeah, I've been at it for 70 years, I know I can take a picture. And I love people saying, I like your writing.
Yeah, well, just to paraphrase it, like I said, I live in Japan. I'm a very rare foreigner, and I do things that I'm a performer of traditional Japanese folk music, so it's even more rare. So you spend a lot of time in your own head, and by reading Modern Instances, it really kind of made me see a lot more clarity in everyday things, and also able to map out and understand things on a greater level. So that's, I think, the greatest benefit. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have another question back here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question about your early work, your
Yeah.
photo book there. Your relationship with some of your subjects, it seems like they've accepted, you into their circle. They're
Well,
accepting.
Warhol people did. These people I didn't know. I
But
mean,
the people on the street, some of your images.
I would just go up to people. I can't explain it.
I know, but
I would go up to
it
people.
looks like a medium.
I'd be this far away and
Yeah.
take their picture.
Yeah.
And no one seemed to care. And it could have been I was a kid.
Right.
There weren't that many photographers.
Yeah.
I was obviously a little nerd with a fancy German camera, a 14-year-old with a Leica.
Yeah.
And
Those, a lot of those images, were they medium format or were
no, all of them, it's all 35.
35.
I first had a Nikon. The ones that look like they were done with telephoto lenses were done with a Nikon,
Okay.
but most of the others were done with a Leica.
Uh-huh.
A Leica primarily with a 35mm lens. I had other lenses, I had 28, 21,
Mm-hmm.
but most of it is Leica.
Could I just ask, on one of your other books, the Uncommon Places.
Yeah.
You have a lot of places where it looks like you scouted out the best places to photograph, how long did it take? Because some of those landscapes are beautiful, with the cars and looks like you're up above looking down.
Well, I would, I drove around the country, and that's all I would do all day.
Just
I would take 2 months, 3 months, and photograph dawn to dusk 7 days a week. And so you see a lot.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite book of yours. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.